Good morning, guys. Probably good evening for you by the time you're watching this. Anyway, we're going to start today's session off with a little vampire joke. Why did the vampire get kicked out of the house? Because he was a pain in the neck. Okay, we're starting chapter 5. This is called Chester Goes Into His Act. Chester. Remember, we're talking about Chester the cat, Harold the dog, who is telling the story, and then, of course, Bunnicula. The next morning, I was awakened by a scream. Robert, Robert, come down here right away. There's something wrong in the kitchen. For a moment, panic seized me. I thought maybe she'd run out of dog food. But then I remembered the events of the previous evening. Mr. Monroe came bounding down the stairs. Chester, Chester, did you see Mr. Monroe? His face has turned white. It's Bunnicula, isn't it? No, Chester said. It's shaving cream, you idiot. By now, the excitement in the kitchen was at full throttle. The table was covered with Bunnicula's handiwork. There were white beans, white peas, white squash, and white tomatoes, white lettuce, white zucchini. What can this mean? Mrs. Monroe was saying. I'm getting worried. One tomato is curiosity, but this is unheard of. There must be something wrong with our refrigerator. That's it. It's turning all the vegetables white, said Mr. Monroe. But look, I left these vegetables on the windowsill, and they're white too. This squash I left in the bowl on the table. At that moment, Pete and Toby came into the kitchen. Holy cow, what's going on? Hey, maybe it's a vegetable blight, Mom. Could that be, Robert? Did you ever hear of anything like that? Well, no, actually. Well, that is, I've heard of blight, but nothing like this. Chester leaned my way. This will take forever if we leave it up to them. Sometimes humans can be so slow. I started to answer Chester, but he was already heading for the table. What about that friend of yours in the agriculture department? Asked Mom. Oh, you mean Tom Cragen? Well, could we call him, ask him if we're doing something wrong? Peter interjected. Mom, it's DDT. I know about this stuff. It's because you buy vegetables that aren't organic. Peter, all vegetables are organic, Mrs. Monroe replied. Not what my teacher says. See, Toby, I told you this would happen. They're using chemicals on our food. If you're not careful, you'll turn white too. Like Dad? Oh, Robert, could you take that shaving cream off your face? Oh, yes, of course. Where's my towel? I know I brought it down with me. For that matter, where was Chester? I'd seen him going toward the table, but I had lost track of him listening to all that talk about DDT. I just hoped they didn't use any of that stuff where they grew chocolate cupcakes. Pete, did you take my towel? Dad, why would I take your towel? I don't shave. Just then the door swung wide open. I could not believe my eyes. There was Chester with Mr. Monroe's towel draped across his back and tied under his neck like a cape. Well, that was strange enough, but on his face was an expression that sent chills down my spine. His eyes were wide and staring. The corners of his mouth were pulled back in an evil grimace. His teeth were bared and gleaming in the morning light. He cackled menacingly and threw back his head as if he were laughing at all of us. I thought he completely lost his mind. There's my towel. Chester, what's the matter? Were you cold? Mr. Monroe bent down to take the towel off of Chester, but before he could lay his hands on it, Chester flipped over on his back, closed his eyes, and folded his paws over his chest. It was a hideous sight. He opened his eyes wide, then with paws outstretched, He slowly lifted his head, his eyes glazed and vacant. Soon the upper half of his body followed until he was in a sitting position. This is what he looks like. Hey, Dad, did you leave your brandy glass out last night? Chester's acting a little weird. Well, son, cats are funny creatures. I glanced at Chester. He wasn't laughing. Chester, what are you up to? I'm a vampire, you dolt. Can't you tell? I'm trying to warn them. Well, it's not working. You'd better think of something else. Chester frowned, apparently deep in thought. So you see, Toby, Mr. Rowe was explaining, all cats are as individual as all people. Maybe he just wants to get our attention. Isn't that right, kitty cat? Ordinarily, Chester would have left the room upon being called kitty cat, but he was lost in thought. Come on, Chester, give me back my towel. Mr. Monroe moved toward Chester, and Chester's eyes lit up. He looked at me and smiled. I sensed I was not going to like what Chester had in mind. I was toying with the notion of slinking under the table when Chester fixed me with his eyes. How deep they were, like black pools. I felt myself floating, lost in them, my will no longer my own. I felt an inexplicable urge to murmur, "Yes, master," when he walked slowly, steadily toward me. As he drew nearer, I found myself unable to move. He stopped before me, never taking his gaze from me, and he lunged. Yo, Mom! Chester bit Harold on the neck. Aw, that wasn't a real bite, was it, Chester? That was a love bite. Isn't that cute? Love bite my foot. That hurt. Chester, what is the matter with you? I sputtered. Do I look like a tomato? Oh, it doesn't matter anyway, Harold. They don't understand. How can human beings read the same books I do and still be so thick? Our conversation was interrupted. Mrs. Monroe picked up Chester and cuddled him. I was praying she would not add insult to injury by kissing his nose, which he hates more than anything. Oh, poor Chester, she said. Do you need a little love? Do you know what I'm going to do, you big ball of fur? Oh, I could tell what was coming. I'm going to kiss your little nose. Yep, I could tell it was coming all right. And Chester knew better than to resist. He went limp in Mrs. Monroe's arms, and Mr. Monroe took his towel off of Chester. Still don't know why he's wearing my towel, he said. I think he must be cold, dear. Here's your towel. Why don't you get his kitty sweater? Chester looked ill. He can wear his sweater all day. As Chester was being buttoned into his bright yellow sweater with little purple mice in cowboy hats all over the sweater, Mr. Monroe said, "What about those vegetables? Do you think I should call Tom Cragen?" "Yes, dear," Mrs. Monroe said. "Why don't you? I'm sure there's some explanation. In the meantime, I will change markets. To tell you the truth, I'm really much more worried about Chester. We'd better keep our eye on him." Chester and I did not speak until late afternoon. I was busy nursing my neck where Chester had bit me, and Chester was busy hiding under the sofa, too embarrassed to be seen in that ugly sweater. When we did speak at last, it was a brief exchange. "Hey, Chester," I called when he finally crawled out from under. "We don't have to worry about any vampire bunnies anymore. All you have to do is stand outside his cage in that sweater." He'll laugh himself to death. Chester was not amused. "That's right. Make fun, all of you. No one understands. I tried to warn them. They wouldn't listen. Now I'm going to take matters into my own hands." Whereupon Chester and his 16 purple mice went into the kitchen for dinner. And that's the end of chapter 5. Now, we'll finish with another little vampire joke. Where do vampires wash up? That's right, in the bathtub. See you for chapter 6.